analyzing the global supply and demand outlook is not easy. At the time of coronavirus, at a time of the COVID-19 pandemic, there are so many uncertainties. It has spread all over. More than half of the world population is affected in one way or the other by lockdowns or government restrictions. This is having a major impact on consumption and on production and on logistics. The damage to the global economy will be huge, and massive financial support is required to prevent bankruptcies. Effects on the agricultural sector are partly opposed, different directions. Vegetable oils are fully exposed to the bearish spillover effects of the plunging energy prices resulting from the price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia. Prices plummeted to around $20 per barrel compared with $60 at the start of this year. Biodiesel consumption is declining, partly because of sharply reduced demand for diesel fuel. On the other hand, oil meal prices have rallied due to concern about South American export delays, concern about insufficient arrivals at a time at which many compound feed producers had relatively little physical stocks. Animals have to be fed. There are effects on logistics, effects on field work, harvesting, planting. Will there be an effect on the plantings of the coming crops in North America, or the winter crops in Argentina, or the harvesting? And there are, of course, a lot of effects on demand. Prices of oil meals rallied in March, but lately came under pressure, as we can see here in the slide, because the interruptions in Argentine and Brazilian exports did not occur so far. The global oilseed outlook. Increasing dominance of soybeans. In the past 30 years, world imports of soybeans doubled every 10 years. Rising dominance of soybeans, other oilseeds, production of other oilseeds relatively flat. Situation of oil meals, importance of soybean meal, world production of soybean meal estimated at around 241 million tons in the current season, accounting for 2/3 of world production of all oil meals. And as you can see, the importance of soybean meal increased significantly over the past 30 years, and this trend is likely to continue. Fish meal shrinking, rapeseed meal shrinking, sunflower meal rising slightly. Oils and fats. Dominance of palm oil. Palm oil accounting for about 32% of world production currently. There are major changes happening at the moment. Palm oil production is set to decline, and I will point to this later, and this has opportunities for soybean oil and sunflower oil to gain market share. World production of all oils and fats almost trebling over the past 27 years, an average annual growth of 5.6 million tons in this period. But in the current season, we're going to see a decline in world production of all oils and fats due to developments, mainly due to developments in palm oil. Let us look now more closely on soybeans. World production is declining in the current season by 24 million tons. This is partly cushioned by record large opening stocks at the start of the season, which were up 17 million tons. Still, total supplies are down. Biggest factor, of course, is to be seen in the shortfall in the US soybean crop by 24 million tons last autumn. But the new development has happened in South America. South American production of soybeans, instead of rising by 8 to 9 million tons in early 2020, is probably rising only by 1 or 2 million tons, or just stagnating, or probably even declining slightly. This is not sure at the moment. Harvesting is completed in Paraguay. Very good crop in Paraguay, 10.5 to 11 million tons. Record crop in Brazil. Most of the harvesting is completed with record yields and record production in central and north Brazil. But in Rio Grande do Sul, drought, severe drought in critical phases of development is sharply cutting production. It's not sure how much. There are some observers who say that the production is down by approximately 50% from close to 20 million tons last year to around 10 million tons this year. Others say it is 11, 12. CONAB just released their estimate of 13 million tons. I think CONAB is still too high. So it is very well possible that the Brazilian crop is only very close to last year's level, despite higher plantings. Last year was close to 121 million tons in Brazil. This year, probably slightly higher or unchanged. Our number at the moment is 122.5. The Argentine crop is also declining, weather-caused damage in several major regions. It was just too dry during February and March, when flowering and pod setting phases, and it's particularly the later planted soybeans which are suffering most. But the Bolsa de Cereales de Buenos Aires is has even reduced their crop to 49.5 million tons. We at the moment still work with 51, as you can see here. So there are some uncertainties, but bottom line, South American crops are not coming up to expectations, while at the same time exports, particularly out of Brazil, are at a record pace. So there are changes likely to occur in the course of this year, as demand is going to switch to US origin. Now let us look at world soybean crushings. World soybean crushings are recovering in the current season, and this is mainly due to China. The Chinese soybean crush has exceeded expectations in the first half of this year, in the first half of this season, as meal demand is picking up. Meal demand has actually started to increase from a year ago, during October-March, which is somewhat surprising, partly also linked to reduced availability of rapeseed meal and other oil meals. So more soybean meal is required. Also for the now recovering pork production. World crushings of soybeans declined by fell by about 12 million tons below trend last season, and although it's recovering this season by about 6 to 7 million tons, it's still staying below trend. In China, imports of soybeans are increasing. Stocks were very low in mid-2019, so the stocks had to be replenished and crushings picked up. So the Chinese soybean imports were increased significantly by approximately 8 million tons in October, February as compared to a year ago. Of which the US provided 12.8 million tons in this period against only 1 million tons last year, but Brazilian exports to China declined primarily in the first few months, which is October, arrival October, December, October, January. We forecast total Chinese soybean imports to recover to 91 million tons, a very strong recovery, but still staying below the previous high of 2 years ago, but still 91 million tons, of which approximately 21 million tons we think is likely to be imported from the US, which will require that an additional 8 million tons will have to be imported for the rest of this year. This can only be done, of course, if China resumes purchases. Export sales commitments or undelivered export sales to China from the US are very low at the moment. We actually expect that China will become a more active buyer of US soybeans in coming weeks, probably soon, while Brazilian exports will start declining from a year ago. Brazilian exports to China from May or at the latest from June onward. In total, Brazil will probably export 58 million tons, which is down from last year's record because of the lower arrivals of Brazilian beans in the first few months of the current season in China. World soybean imports, here summarized in the slide. World soybean imports are set to increase to 155 million tons. This is our latest estimate. Driver is China, but we also expect a pickup in imports into Europe. European soybean crushings will probably recover in the second half of this year, partly because of insufficient soya meal export supplies from South America, and also because some of the crushers will shift their capacity from rapeseed into soybeans. European soybean imports and crush were down in the first half of the year, but are seen to recover. Other increases are seen in Mexico, in Egypt, in Pakistan, in other countries. Now, what does this mean for the world balance of soybeans? Now, here a brief summary. With crushings rising and other use also increasing, we estimate world stocks to be down by approximately 14 million tons from a year ago, 96 million tons. A biggest year-on-year decline in the US, yes, naturally, due to the big drop in production. But it's also interesting to see that Brazilian stocks will be down from a year ago. Brazilian exports were front-loaded, close to 12 million tons shipped in March, and probably again close to 12 million tons in April. And if that is being done, total Brazilian stocks at the end of April, total Brazilian soybean stocks at the end of April will probably be down by 4 to 5 million tons from a year ago. So Brazilian export supplies are going to shrink for the remainder of this year. We are going to see some year-on-year reductions already in June, July, August, but still, end of August, Brazilian stocks are down, we think, about 2 million tons from a year ago. In the US, and here we show our US soybean supply and demand estimates, record soybean crush exceeding expectations in February and March, favorable crush margins, increasing export sales for soya oil and particularly soya meal, benefiting from the concern that South American export supplies will not be sufficient. A new record, 58.3 million tons is our current estimate, may still be slightly too low. We have to wait. On the other hand, US soybean exports fell short of expectations lately, in the past 2 months in particular. We expect export sales to recover in coming months, benefiting from the developments in South America and benefiting from rising requirements for soybean imports and crushings in China. US planting intentions, most of the farmers indicated that they prefer corn, but in view of the recent collapse in ethanol demand and in ethanol production in the US, and the collapse of corn prices, it's likely that several farmers will revise their planting intentions in favor of soybeans. Although the stocks are down, US stocks are down from a year ago, they are still relatively high at the end of August this year, with larger soybean plantings and normal weather conditions contrary to last year. There is no supply concern at the moment for next season. Soybean stocks, world soybean stocks are going to be down. Our estimate is down 14 million tons at the end of this season, but with a normalization or a normal crop likely to be expected for the US. Probably a new record for the US this coming autumn. There is no supply concern. Stocks, lower South American stocks, yes, at the end of August, but world stocks in total, second highest on record at the end of this season. Soybean prices have been relatively sideways. They recovered slightly. I think they are well priced at the moment. I see little downward potential, except of any major weather disturbances. But also relatively little upward potential. Sunflower seed moving from record to record, world production rising to 56 million tons in the current season, mainly on account of Russia and Ukraine. But markets for sunflower seed and oil are on fire lately after the Russian government announced an export ban, Russia and Kazakhstan, but mainly Russia, with no Russian exports of sunflower seed in the next 3 months. Turkey will have difficulties in satisfying import requirements. Sunflower oil prices have appreciated considerably lately, widening the premium over soybean oil because of the recent or previous large demand and the slowing down of the supplies for the remainder of this season. Rapeseed production worldwide on a downtrend. In Europe, also Canada, production has declined last year, partly because of deteriorated export prospects to China. This China-Canada problem is still not solved. Only 2 cargoes shipped every month at the moment. So the Canadian exports in total are declining despite higher shipments to some other destinations. Stocks are relatively high in Canada at the end of this season. There is not a big incentive for Canadian farmers to expand plantings for the new crop. Worldwide, relatively tight supplies for rapeseed, but this tightness is partly offset by a sharp decline taking place in European biodiesel production in the current year. We expect European biodiesel production to be down by at least 1.5 million tons from a year ago. Now turning to palm oil, 40 years of success story is probably ending. Many challenges: declining yields, aging trees, declining competitiveness, and labor shortage. In the current year, Malaysian production is likely to decline significantly, partly because of the biological decline in yields, partly because of the yield effects of reduced fertilizer consumption, and partly because of labor shortage. And this labor shortage is likely to become even more severe because of the restrictions on traveling imposed by the Malaysian government as a precautionary measure to keep the infection with the coronavirus low. So the plantations will have increasing problems in acquiring labor in the second half of this year. So the palm oil market is tightening. World production in the current season will be down by at least 2 million tons in October-September, probably 2.5 million tons or more, mainly in Malaysia. Also, the Indonesian production has turned out lower than expected lately. So the production side is tightening. But on the other hand, there are also significant losses on the demand side. The biodiesel production is declining in some major countries, and it's falling short of expectations in South America, in the US, in Europe, in Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia. So also the palm oil demand is turning out lower than expected. Still, we see a production deficit and palm oil stocks are declining. We see this here on the next slide. Following 3 years of significant production increases by more than 8 million tons in 2016-17, 6 million ton increase in the 17-18 season, and close to 4 million ton increase last season, palm oil production is now shrinking by at least 2 million tons. And with stocks already low at the start of this season, supplies are down even more. Consumption of palm oil, world consumption, after skyrocketing by 8 million tons last season, is now going to shrink. We don't know how much, but it's declining, and it's down by probably 1 million tons. This is our guess at the moment. We will continue to monitor this regularly, and we will publish the results in our weekly publication and in our daily flashes, and details of that can be found on the internet. World production of palm oil is shrinking. Soya oil is going to be up slightly, but stays below trend in the current season. Further increase in sunflower oil, but very little changes in other oils and fats. So the drivers have been soya, palm, sun, and rape, if you like. Rape to the downside, but soya and sun to the upside. For all oils and fats, we expect world production to decline in the current season. This is very unusual. The increase over the past couple of years, the average annual increase was 5 to 6 million tons. In last season, the increase was 4 million. In 17-18, the increase was more than 12 million tons. Now, the current season, world production is declining. World consumption is rising. We still assume about 1 million tons, despite the losses we are expecting for biodiesel. We still expect an increase, and despite the demand losses resulting from the coronavirus problems and impacts, and this is creating a shortage and a further decline in palm oil stocks at the end of this season, according to our estimates. Now finally, let us briefly look at biodiesel, our latest estimates. World production trebled over the past 11 years. It trebled world production of biodiesel and HVO, reaching a peak of 46 million tons last year. Now for the current year, we have revised our production estimates for the European Union. We now expect a decline of at least 1.5 million tons, probably 2 million tons in the European Union. With current prices, discretionary demand and prices and price relationships vis-a-vis fossil fuels, which has deteriorated incredibly, discretionary demand is virtually non-existent. Indonesian production is not coming up to expectations. This is a swing factor to watch. B30 is very, very unlikely to be fulfilled. But how much will really be used in Indonesia? This is a very important swing factor to watch in coming months. But we made a downward revision. Indonesian exports of biodiesel will be very, very small due to the developments in Europe and China. Brazilian, Argentine biodiesel consumption and production is also turning out lower than expected. So after the significant growth we have seen in soybean oil usage and in palm oil usage in particular over the past couple of years, 2020 is going to be a season of contraction. This is an important bearish factor to be considered in the environment of lower than expected world production. And we still don't know what the net result is, and the market will sensitively react to changes on the production and on the demand side of the equation, not only looking at biodiesel, but also looking at the development of food demand. How long will the lockouts continue in the important consuming countries, and what effect will this have on overall food demand? There are a lot of questions, and the market will also react sensitively to developments on the production side. How is the Indonesian and Malaysian palm oil production going to develop? At the moment, the interruptions in Indonesia are still relatively small, but we have to see whether this virus will continue to spread and to what extent this will affect harvesting of fresh fruit bunches. In Malaysia, there is concern that lack of labor could significantly increase the losses, the production losses at the plantations. If the fresh fruit bunches are not harvested on time because of lack of labor, or because of processing facilities are closed, because of government, regulations, then the fresh fruit bunches will rotten in the fields, and this will directly reduce production of palm oil and of palm kernels, and thus also will have an effect of the supplies of palm kernel oil and on the lauric oil market. In contrast, if crushings are interrupted, transportation and crushings of soybeans are interrupted in Argentina or Brazil or the US or other countries, the soybeans are still there for later consumption. So that's a big difference, and we have to keep this in mind. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I would be happy to take your questions, and if I can be of assistance to you, let me know. Thank you.